with these traditional brands, we've seen MTV and VH1 just die miserable deaths. And at the same time, though, the circle I'm in with creators, and even I at one point was like, I want to make this a show. And I had those LA meetings in like the gross corporate rooms and have people telling me like, okay, so you won't get paid for this a lot, but it's great exposure. It's TV. I'm like, dude, I already have exposure. If you're telling me that it's not even something that I could make a decent buck off of, why? And it's them taking the creative control, and it's them doing so much of it, and then you just turn into like a talking head. And with MTV, it's really weird because people are still so adamant about like, oh, I have a pilot and I might sell my show to MTV. But it's like, no one's gonna see it, and it's such a sad missed opportunity because MTV has that brand awareness, that mainstream awareness, where if they made a poppin' YouTube channel 5 years ago and have been putting, if then it became web series on MTV YouTube channel, oh my God, do you know how much they could be crushing right now? But they're still doing TRL
because they had all this like infrastructure and they had all this money, and they're like, we're not too sure about this social thing. Is it a fad? Is it not a fad? And you're just like, no, it's the future. Right. And like the interesting thing is like in Canada, there was like a very big broadcaster that isn't, you know, as well known anymore, but it was called Much Television, and it was like music on demand television, and watched all the music videos growing up. And I remember we had to pay as a band to have our video played on this channel. I remember we finished it and we had to have it converted to tape. So we had to find some guy to put our digital video on some beta master tape. It cost us like $300, sent it in by mail. And then like one day someone was like, hey, I think I saw your video on Much. And I was like, oh my goodness, but everybody had watched it on YouTube. It was like all there. And then we had posted like, oh, this is the greatest, where video is being featured on Much. And like the vanity plate of it is kind of cool, but it almost felt like payola. Like it was like we had to pay to have our video distributed to something that like no one really cared about. And like, I think the vanity plate is fine, but it's one of those things that's like, once you're past that, like to have that in your bio, cool, dip, get the vanity plate and move on.
And I see it all the time in so many different places. In regards to maybe getting verified on Instagram. That process, okay, Instagram is new media. You know, I see it as new media, but you have the traditional print and the traditional blogs, Mashable, all of that stuff. I still think they're doing cool stuff on social, but I still consider that very much like old media, blogs and stuff. In order to get verified on Instagram, you have to have traditional media. And I'm like, why is the reason to get verified in new media to be verified by old media?
That's so,
it makes
so
no
backwards
sense to me. You know, but so it's an exciting time to be in the middle of it, to be, I think, on the right side of things. But then I'm always very curious, looking out like, oh, what is VR AR doing? What is 360 doing? So what are some things that you're interested right now that you think is going to be in the next 5-10 years?
I mean, I really think VR is super cool. I just don't think it's hit like a mass audience yet. That like, I think it's mainly because it's just not that accessible. And like, to really experience VR, you need the goggles, you need, you know, the headphones, you need to have this type of content. Number one, I just don't think there's enough high quality content out there that people are like, oh wow, like this is amazing.
They need that hit TV show.
Yeah, exactly. Something. And they need the writers and they need the teams behind it. And I just think the really top talent, like let's call them like the people who've moved over to like something like Netflix, or the people who are creating that type of content, they're just not in the VR space yet. So you don't have those like epic writers and those things that would hook you emotionally. I think the vanity of like, wow, VR is super cool. I think it's awesome. I think
do you like wearing it though? I find it kind of annoying.
It's a little uncomfortable. And like, I think there's still like a lot of things they need to tweak until it feels like it's like integrated into our society better. I just think it's cool. I have a lot of friends who do VR and they make really great content. And like, I just wish that the world could experience the stuff that like, they're doing, because I feel like there's things that they've done that would hook people into it.
What's their name?
They're called Combo Bravo.
Okay.
He's like one of my best friends growing up, and like they're basically like the top VR company in Canada now. Yeah, and they like travel all around the world, and they like, the stories are just like the best, but their content is amazing. And like specifically, like one of my favorite shots that they did is they went to like the Somalian border, like literally went all the way to Somalia to a refugee camp, and then like put everybody around in a circle so that you could see like what life was like there.
Wow.
And I think my ability to empathize with that situation drastically increased because of VR. And I think that's what makes that medium so powerful.
That's cool. And I think that was the same people who you made a video on, right? In terms of finding a niche and not to become desensitized to the situation, talk about business again, but in terms of building a company and meaningful content, I think it goes so far when you can find a niche and go full on. So their thing is very obviously VR, maybe 360 stuff. And that's probably a part of why they've found their success. Yeah.
Well, I think it's super cool that like basically they're like 26, 27, 28, like these group of guys that are basically working on some of like the most world-class like projects with like Nordstrom and like massive brands where the majority of the people on the team are in like their 40s and 50s, and like they're the ones pioneering this. And they in like literally a year they went from like 0 to hero. And like in terms of big projects and big budgets and working with like the biggest brands. And like that's because they found a niche, got really good at it, and just exploded. And like they were doing all the traditional stuff, competing against like music videos and with other people. And it wasn't until they did something different that everyone's eyes were on them.